Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down complex topics going straight to the source material. Today, we're diving into a really big one, the landmark advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice, issued on July 19, 2024.
Okay, let's get right into it. This is the monumental question the world's highest court was asked to answer. After more than half a century, what does international law actually have to say about Israel's presence in the occupied Palestinian territory?
First, a really crucial point. The court wasn't hearing a typical case between two countries. This was an advisory opinion. The UN General Assembly basically asked the court, hey, can you clarify the law for us? So think of it less as a verdict and more as an authoritative statement on the law from the world's top judges.
So, what exactly did the UN ask the court to weigh in on?
Well, the request was really broken down into two main parts. First, the UN wanted to know the legal consequences of Israel's prolonged occupation, its settlement policy, and its annexation of territory. But the second question, that one went even further. It asked how all those policies affect the legal status of the occupation itself, and what obligations does that create for Israel, for every other country, and for the UN. A huge ask.
Okay, on to the court's investigation. Let's see how it broke down these policies before it could even begin to figure out the consequences.
The court started with just the sheer duration. The law of occupation is built on the idea that it's a temporary situation. But the fact that this has lasted for more than 57 years, that became a central theme for the court's entire analysis.
Next, the court looked at the settlement policy, and based on UN reports, it found that by 2023, the number of Israeli settlers living in the West Bank and East Jerusalem had grown to a staggering 700,000 approximately.
And the court's finding on this was absolutely unambiguous. It concluded that this settlement policy is a clear violation of the Fourth Geneva Convention, which prohibits an occupying power from moving its own civilians into occupied territory. The court then detailed what it called a dual legal system. You've got Israeli settlers governed by domestic civil law, while Palestinians in the same area fall under Israeli military law. This extends to court systems, even to things like building permits, creating what the opinion calls a near-complete separation between the two communities.
Now, when you take that system of separation, along with other discriminatory measures like restrictions on movement, the court reached a very, very strong conclusion. It found that Israel's policies constitute a breach of the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination.
Then the court asked, are these policies just temporary measures? It determined that these long-term, irreversible actions like expanding settlements and building integrated infrastructure aren't just temporary acts of an occupier. They effectively amount to annexation.
So, let's look at how all of this builds to the central finding of the entire opinion. All these individual conclusions lead to one big one. The court took all of these findings, the prolonged nature, the illegal settlements, the systemic discrimination, the de facto annexation, and used them to answer the UN's biggest question about the legality of the whole situation.
And here's the crucial point. The court found that the combination of all these serious breaches of international law means that Israel's occupation is no longer legal. Its very presence there is now deemed unlawful.
This finding of illegality is a real game changer. Why? Because it creates a whole new set of legal obligations, not just for Israel, but for every other country in the world, and for the United Nations itself.
The court was super systematic here, laying out the consequences for three distinct groups. So let's look at each one.
For Israel, the obligations are direct. End its unlawful presence as rapidly as possible. Immediately stop all settlement activity, repeal discriminatory laws, and provide full reparation for the damage caused. Now, for all other states, the court outlined some very clear duties. They must not recognize the situation as legal or help maintain it. They have to cooperate to bring it to an end. And, this is a big one, they have to distinguish in all their dealings, like trade and diplomacy, between the State of Israel and the occupied territories.
Finally, the court turned to the UN itself. It basically put the onus on the organization that requested the opinion, especially its most powerful bodies, the General Assembly and the Security Council, to figure out what to do next to end the unlawful presence.
So that's the core of this historic advisory opinion. The International Court of Justice has defined the law and laid out the consequences, and it leaves the international community with a legal landmark and a profound political question about what comes next.